We're going to get into the menu structure, but let me just discuss a little thing about the menu structure. It's deep, it's involved, and it was made to be that way. Some people get very hung up on the menus or specific functions within the menu. I'm just here to say, don't get hung up. There's other ways to access features throughout the camera that are much easier than to sit there and dive into the menu system. The menu system was designed for you to go in, for you to explore, for you to customize the camera to your liking. The camera is very customizable. You'll notice there's a lot of function buttons on your cameras. You can actually custom design specific functions to be recalled, at just a push of a button. So keep that in mind. Once you get to some understanding of the menu system, it's basically a one-time thing. It's a one-time thing to customize the camera to your liking, and then that's it. Okay, we're going to start by simply pressing the menu button on the camera itself. The first screen that should show a shooting menu that you see over here. The first camera that lights up is camera number 1. In this menu, it has some quick features. Again, most of these features, except for maybe 1 or 2, are on that super control panel. So the first feature would be card setup mode. I'm going to encourage you not to go through this because this is how you format or erase images on your card. So if you go to the right one more time, you have basically 2 features, an all erase feature and a format feature. A lot of people say, what's the difference between the two? All erase basically erases most of the image information. Format wipes the card to a clean slate. I would prefer format versus all erase because as 30 years as you're all erasing, it still leaves data on your card. And you're going to look and you're going to realize and say, okay, well, I used to get 300 high-quality JPEGs out of this card, and I'm only getting 180. What's the problem? It's because all that information is still being stored on the card itself. So format is used basically when you've safely downloaded all your images to either a hard drive system or to your computer, or to a portable drive, or even online to those data banks. After you've done with your, let's say, your vacation or your shoot, safely download all the images. After they're safely downloaded, format the card. You're not going to destroy your card by formatting it, keeping it on formatting it. It's a myth that a lot of people ask me, am I going to, over length of time, am I going to ruin my card? No, you're not going to ruin your card. So again, after all your images are safely downloaded, format it. When you get a brand new card for the first time, I suggest you strongly format it first. That'll acclimate the card to the camera itself. So again, this is where you would erase your images. Another tip is that I've seen people that come up to me constantly. Hey, I want to look at an image over here. Can I see? And all of a sudden, I'm scrolling through 3,000 or 4,000 images over the period of 2 years. Don't do that. Get those pictures downloaded to a safe device, erase the images on a card, and start fresh. Okay, reset my set is going to be the next feature. In this reset mode, you can reset the camera back to factory default settings. It defaults to basic. You can go to a full, which is this one. This basically resets everything, obviously except for language and some certain settings back to factory default. So if you're playing around with your camera and you've set up a lot of different settings and you forgot what you did and you want to get yourself back to home base, this is the way to do it. This basically resets all your user functions, most of your user functions, and back to factory default. In this also area is your My Sets. You'll see there's four My Sets. This is where you would actually store data. Let me give you a typical example. Let's say I'm shooting a wedding and half of it's outside and half of it's indoors. Let's say the cocktail is indoors and outdoors. I would save a bunch of settings for outdoor photography. I'll save a bunch of settings for indoor photography. I can save those settings in those My Sets, and I can always recall them at a time. when I need it, when need be. If I go to the right one more time, this is where I set those settings, or this is where I can delete those settings and start off fresh. So it's very easy to do. To save your settings, you basically set the settings, you go into My Set, you go over to the right, you press OK at this point, it'll save all the settings that you have on the camera itself. Okay, you pick scenario number 2, go to My Set number 2. Once all those settings are set it again, and then you'll be all set to go. So again, very, very easy, or very nice place to actually store specific settings that you would want to recall back at another time.
How do you recall them back?
Just go right there. Just go right to My Set. There's also in other areas too as well.
Oh, just go back. Just go back.
To set it, that's all. I'll show you. I'll show you. In your programmable function buttons, there will be go to My Set 1, 2, 3, or 4. You can actually program a function button on there. Okay, so we'll go through that. Picture modes. I'm not going to go too heavily deeply into this because there's another way to access that, and that's through your super control panel. But this is where you can, do an eye enhance. You can do a vivid. You can do natural. The camera default setting is natural. If you want to tweak a little bit, if I go to the right one more time, I can adjust my contrast. I can adjust my sharpness. I can adjust saturation, okay, and gradation as well. So again, I have the ability to customize my picture mode settings in this area right over here. This is where you access your resolution. I'm not going to show you how to do it this way because again, it's going to be so much easier with super control panel. So we're just going to leave that as is. Image aspect. Okay, the camera is a 4/3 sensor. When you utilize 4/3, that's the whole sensor area. The beauty about mirrorless cameras that you cannot do with a mirrored SLR is that you can change your aspect ratios. I can change my aspect ratio to square. I can change it to 2:3, 3:2. I can also set it up to 6:9. Digital teleconverter, this gives me the option to actually shoot ×2 on digital teleconverter. Okay, and this section, this is where I can get to all my drive settings and all my time lapse settings as well. Okay, that's about it on that. Okay, I'm gonna jump to camera 2. This section, okay, on the EM5 Mark II, I have it grayed out because obviously I have a setting that's actually not allowing me to get into it. But the top is bracketing. Okay, that's for exposure bracketing. You can actually expose different stops through exposure bracketing. Second feature is HDR. This camera and the EM1 have built-in HDR in the camera. They have 3 HDR modes, HDR1 and HDR2 process the HDR image in the camera itself. 1 is more natural to the eye, 2 is a little bit more saturated, and the third HDR position actually gives you the choice of frame rates at different exposures and for you to do HDR in software post-production. Multiple exposure gives you the option to take 2 exposures and actually overlap them. It's a beautiful feature within this camera because it takes all the guesswork out because you can't do this feature in a mirrored digital SLR. It actually takes the first picture, it ghosts it, and lets you recompose over your second image and take the image itself. And it also figures out exposure for you. I do apologize, that jumps back. Keystone compensation, another feature that's available with only mirrorless cameras. You can actually control your converging lines or distortion. I can go up to a building and naturally you see those 2 converging lines into a building. I can actually straighten them out. You can straighten them out horizontally and also you can straighten them out vertically. The back dial over here, I believe, is vertical, and the front dial actually will control horizontal distortion. So this is built into the camera, and you see it as it happens. So there's no guesswork. Anti-shock silent, that's all part of your drive modes. I'm not going to get into this too heavily because I'm going to show it to you on the super control panel. So this is just another way of accessing it at this point. High resolution shot, okay, in this mode, this gives you the ability to shoot actually 40 megapixel images. The EM5 Mark II has that capability of shooting very large image files. Raw file is almost 100 megabytes. The camera now needs to be tripod mounted, and when you're in this shot, or when you're in this mode, the camera actually takes 8 separate half-frame shots. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Combines all those images into one and makes it one big file. So you have the capability of producing 40 megabyte files with this camera. The only two downsides are the camera needs to be static, needs to be mounted to a tripod, and your subject needs to be also static as well. But again, you have the capability of producing very, very high resolution images on this camera. Okay, RC mode, I'm going to get into this just a little bit because I think it's important. Once you turn it on and I press my OK button, it activates this panel over here. RC mode means for remote control flash. If you use the provided small flash that comes with the camera, you can actually control any R series Olympus flash, whether it be the FL36R, the FL50R, or FL600R. Any designation Olympus flash with an R designation is remote. So I can control up to 200 flashes simply just by utilizing that mode. And when you get into this mode, you can control all your flashes. You got 3 discrete channels over here, or 3 banks, A, B, and C. As you can see, I'm set up for A right now. At this point, I can choose TTL. In other words, it'll be metered off the sensor. I can do it auto. It basically meters off the flashes itself or the thyristor from the flash. I can go manual, so I can actually control the output of each flash manually. If I want to do full power, half power, 8th power, I have that ability to do that. And off, obviously. So again, I can control 3 banks of flashes. So you can do if you're doing a traditional studio, you can do left, right light, or main and fill, and actually you can do a hair light as well. There's another section over here called FP. Over there, the FP TTL was an Olympus innovation back in the 70s. That gives you the ability to actually sync much higher than the camera can do. You can actually, in this camera, you can actually sync all the way up to 1/8,000th of a second. So just keep in mind, as you go to FPTL, your guide numbers go down. Okay. You can, this one over here controls the output of the flash that's up on top. So if you have your flashes mount far away, obviously you want to change that output to a high setting. Oops, let me go back. So actually I can change it to a high setting, medium, or low. Okay, that sends the signal from this flash to your other flashes. And channels. You have 4 discrete channels at this point. So if you have other Olympus shooters that are also using other lights, you can actually shut them out if need be. So that's where I would use my private channel itself. And that's about it. I mean, the only thing that is the stress, if you do use this setting using wireless flashes, after you're done, physically shut it off, because it will actually affect the output of this flash itself. So after you're done, you go back into the menu system, and you just physically shut it off, and then you're good to go. Okay? If you look at the top, you'll see gear A mode. This is all my autofocus manual focus modes. I'm going to go into the right, and I'm going to basically go over some of the features within these focus modes. If I go to the right, it's going to give me all my focus features. S meaning single autofocus. Single autofocus means if I press the shutter down one time, it only focuses once. The only time I can refocus is to actually release the button and press it again. Continuous autofocus, CAF, means as I press that button down, it's continuously focusing on your subject. If you're doing moving subjects, I would strongly suggest, this is the Brian tip, use continuous autofocus if you're photographing subjects that are moving. It works better that way. And manual focus, obviously, manual focus activates the manual focus ring that's on front of your lens. One of my favorite modes is single autofocus plus manual focus. This gives me the ability to tweak if need be. The camera, first of all, can focus much faster than you can manually focus. So if I have it in single autofocus plus manual focus, if I press the button once, it's going to focus on the subject. If I need to tweak a little bit, I can actually use the manual focus ring to tweak. These autofocus systems on these cameras are very sophisticated, they're very accurate, but they're not foolproof. So this is another good way to critique or just do a little bit of fine adjust on focus if the camera doesn't get you there at the same time. Last and final is continuous autofocusing plus track focusing. Track focus needs to see that facial recognition for it to work successfully. So I would use that only in a situation where there's a lot of faces and a lot of faces are looking at the camera itself. Again, this mode is in the Super Control panel, so we'll go over that quickly again with the Super Control panel. Movie mode, again, this is where all your focus, you do your focus adjustments when you're shooting movies. Okay. Full-time autofocus, when I have full-time autofocus on, it means when I turn that camera on, it's continuously focusing. It's probably a feature that I would never use simply because it drains the battery a lot, but there is some situations where you want it to continuously focus all the time without pushing the button. This is where you would go, full-time autofocus. Okay, this section, if you're single autofocusing, the camera defaults to mode 1. This can tend to be very confusing in the beginning. When I looked at it, I was very confused until I just actually sat there and read it, and it makes total sense. Mode 1 is your camera default. If you're in single autofocus, it's spelled out very easily. If you press the camera halfway, it locks your exposure, okay, and locks your focus. If I press the button fully down, it takes the picture. Okay, the AEL, AFL button, and most of our cameras, it's in the back by the viewfinder. When I press that button, I simply lock my exposure. Now, for your back focus fans, this is it, mode 3. Okay, back focus. Okay, if I press the front shutter button, I will lock the exposure. If I press it all the way down, it will take the exposure. If I want to focus on the camera, I have to specifically press that AEL, AFL button, which is in the back of the camera. This is mode 3. So mode 3 is for the fans that like back focusing and don't like the idea of focusing on the shutter button itself. Oops. That's what I love about memory recall. Again, I'm gonna bring it back to mode 1 default because I didn't press OK. So that's. And again, you have the same features in continuous autofocus as well as manual autofocus. Okay, reset lens. Reset lens is default is on. Leave it on because it actually defaults the lens back to infinity position, which is the closed position. If I had a 4/3 system lens, let's say a 50mm macro, the throw on the barrel on the 50mm macro is very extensive. It actually goes out like about almost 3 inches, 3 or 4 inches. If I were to have reset a lens off and shut the camera off, it would just stay out there. So if it reset lens basically resets that lens back to infinity position when I shut the camera off. Bulb and time focusing, very simple. When I'm doing a bulb exposure or time exposure, this is allowing me to actually make a correction on focusing as we're doing bulb and time exposures. Focus ring, it basically goes 2 directions, either clockwise or counterclockwise. Different manufacturers have clockwise positions for near focus, and some have clockwise positions for far focus, or counterclockwise for near focus. So again, if you're used to using near focus in one way or one direction or the other, this is where you would just switch it. It just switches the direction of focusing. That's all. Manual focus assist. I'm going to get into this, which is I think is important, and its advantage of mirrorless, where you can't do it on a mirrored camera. You have the option to magnify. So if I'm doing critical focus, let's say if I'm doing macro shots where I have to obtain very critical focus, it actually, when I turn the focusing ring, it actually magnifies the image so you can do critical focus. This shuts it on, this shuts it off. Focus peaking is, I have it, obviously it's not set to do it because I have something on that's actually not allowing me to do that. But focus peaking, what it does, it actually creates a haze of where my point of focus is. So as I'm moving my focus ring, let's say if you're photographing on an angle down on a subject, you will actually see this haze. This haze, it can either be a white line, in the M5 Mark II, it's either white, black, yellow, or red. Where that haze goes back and forth as you're turning your focus ring, it shows you where your exact point of focus is. That's what focus peaking is. So again, on the EM5 Mark II, with the latest firmware, you can actually do 4 colors: red, white, black, and yellow. In the M1, the newest firmware update will have that feature too, also where you can change the colors for easy reference. So again, focus peaking is the manual focus assist will help you tremendously when critical focuses need be, when you need to do critical focus. Okay, set home. This basically sets your focus positions to a multi. This will actually utilize all 81 focus points. It's pretty much an autofocus, auto-sensing position. It'll sense the subject that has more contrast or the subject that's more closest to you. I particularly don't like this mode because the camera takes control of focus, which I like full control. In this section over here, this shoots a single dot. I prefer a single dot in most of my shooting. It narrows the focusing just to one small dot. You can actually make that dot smaller through this mode over here, and you have a choice of also doing groups or blocks of 9. Blocks of 9 work very well if you're like doing birding photography. With the small dot, sometimes it's very hard to actually focus on the subject if the subject's moving like a bird or a car or sports. Block of 9 just gives you a little bit more of a target area where you can target your subject on. So the lens does less hunting and picking. Okay, so that's all. This is actually, believe it or not, is in Super Control Panel anyway, so I will show you that. AF illuminator. Every camera has an AF illuminator, and when it's very dark, it actually projects this LED light. It helps you focus in low light situations. Sometimes some people do not want that light protruding or that light on. If you're in a situation where you're in a museum where photography is not allowed, if you want to sneak a shot in silent shutter mode, you'll have the ability to do that without getting caught. Face priority default is on, okay? You have several different settings, okay? You have this setting, you have right eye, and you have left eye as well. So if you're doing portraits, sometimes the photographer likes the eye that's facing towards the front to be in focus. This camera has left and right eye priority. It'll focus on the left or right eye. Or this is where you will shut it off. Okay, so again, face priority. I'm going to shut it off because I'm not a face priority fan. AF pointer, that actually just gives you that little green box, the indicator letting you know that where you're focusing on. Manual focus clutch. This is actually firmware 4.0 on the EM1, and it's also the newest firmware, which is not available. It will be available November 25th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Right now, I have a beta version on this camera. So again, you have the option if you're using some lenses that have manual focus clutch to actually disable it. Okay, I'm going to go down one more, and that's going to jump to the B section, which is button, dial, and lever. Okay, button function. This is where you customize the buttons to recall information that you programmed in the camera itself. So let's give you a for instance. For instance, function button 1. Now some cameras have more, or some cameras have less than 4 function buttons, so just keep that in mind. In this I have actually 4 designated function buttons that I can actually recall specific information. Now, someone mentioned that, how do I reset my sets? You can actually dedicate it to any one of these 4 function buttons. So let's give you, I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm just going to give you a for instance. Everyone should have the same choice, by the way. Okay, so I'm going to go to the right. Camera default is on function 1 is auto exposure, autofocus lock. I'm going to scroll through some of the other features that you have available to function 1 button. I'm going down. Obviously, you have a depth of field preview option. You have a one-touch white balance. Okay, if you want to do a manual white balance, you have a one-touch white balance. You can select your AF target mode. Okay, you can home position your settings on your AF target. You can switch to manual focus. Okay, you can change RAW to RAW plus JPEG. You can change your quality settings. You can test a picture without writing to the card itself. Yes, you can actually snap a picture and it won't write it to the card. Okay, there's your My Sets. So if you want to access your My Sets that you programmed, there's My Set 1, My Set 2, My Set 3, and My Set 4. So this is just one of all the function buttons that you can program this to. If you have the underwater housing, this is where you go to underwater macro modes. You can, the one on top? Yeah, if you have an underwater housing for the camera, this is where you can access your underwater macro mode. There's two different underwater macro modes. This is where you would access that. Switch between the two. Exposure compensation. Okay. Live guide brings up the live guide. This is where you can actually switch between 1 times and 2 times on your digital teleconverter once activated. You can set it for keystone compensation. Okay, you can set it to magnify. You can set it to HDR. You can set it for bracketing. Okay, you can switch dials if you want to. You can set your rear dial for white balance or ISO. This is multifunction. It basically will let you set various functions to the dial itself. Focus peaking. Okay, so I can access focus peaking. I can bring up the level display. This is a feature that's available on the new firmware. Okay, I can use it to set up my viewfinder as a simulated optical viewfinder. You can switch off between live control and super control panel. And this will completely disable that function. So all your other function buttons will have all those features in it. So again, you can actually command each function button to do a specific mode that you've actually saved in the function button area. Dial function, you have program, aperture, shutter, and manual dial functions. It's pretty much self-explanatory. I'm not going to go crazily into this, but let me just give you a few features. If I turn my front dial over here, it's going to adjust exposure compensation. If I turn my rear dial, it's going to program shift. I can shift them around where they're both exposure comp, flash exposure comp. You can put flash exposure comp and assign it to the front wheel. You can assign back wheel exposure comp, front wheel flash exposure comp, both flash exposure compensation, both program shift. Okay, this is the factory default, so we're just going to leave that way. So again, this basically will give you different features with your front and rear dial. That's all it does. Okay. So again, you can choose that program, aperture, shutter, menu, and as well. Dial direction. Exposure, F number, upper. I'm not going to really get into this. No need. Lever function. If you have an EM1 or an EM5 Mark II, you have that lever in the back. Okay, this is where you can switch functions, different functions for that lever. Right now, mode one is set for custom functions settings. Number 2 sets ISO and white balance. So again, you can change these modes. Again, there's six different modes here. Again, I'm not going to get into every one, or this is going to be a 3.5-hour class. But you can see everything's pretty much all spelled out on the bottom. Now, from completely disabling that lever to adding different features for different settings. Okay. Camera default is mode 1. Okay. Optional grip dial function on the EM1 Mark II. excuse me, EM5 Mark II, you do have a port on that grip for your headphone volume. This is where you would actually control your headphone volume if you're shooting video and you want to monitor your volume. If you want to raise it up or lower it, this is where you would do that through your optional grip on the EM5 Mark II. Okay, we're going to go down to the C section, which is release priority. The camera defaults to off. This is my tip. I tend to leave it on. What does release priority do? Release priority in single autofocus mode, if you have that off, it will not take the image if the camera doesn't confirm focus. If the camera doesn't confirm focus, you're going to sit there until you press the button, until you're blue in the face. It's not going to do it. In some situations, you're going to miss the shot, even if it was a little bit of out of focus. I'd rather have a little bit of out of focus image and get the shot than have no shot at all. This is where you adjust your sequential mode, okay? Sequential is where I push that button down and actually continuously takes pictures. I can adjust my frame rates in low. I can adjust my frame rates in high. If I go to the right, this is where I can customize. I can customize if I want to do 1 frame or 2 frames, all the way up to 5 frames per second in the low mode. In the high mode, it obviously maxes out at 10 frames per second. Again, I can control how many frames per second that I can do in high mode with that. Same thing with silent shutter in low. Same thing with silent shutter in high. Okay, I can adjust the frame rates. And obviously you can see if you're in silent shutter mode, which is an electronic shutter mode, you can actually go and increase your frame rate up to 11 frames per second. That's the max.
5, 10, and 5.
Mm-hmm. That's obviously camera's defaults, but you can change it if you want. See, a lot of people will like to slow down the high frame rate because I don't need 10 frames per second. If I push the button down for 3 seconds, I just took 30 images. Probably I won't even use all those. So again, if you want to tame it down a little bit, that's where you would go. Image stabilizer, this is where you adjust your image stabilizer settings. I will show it to you on the super control panel instead of going to here, because there's really no need to get in there. Image stabilizer, again, this is the image stabilizer in sequential mode. You can actually have it shut off or on at this point. Usually when you're in sequential mode, you don't want the image stabilizer to work because you're shooting at a very fast shutter speed as well. Okay, halfway. I'm not going to get into this. Lens image stabilization priority, I'm not going to get into that either. Release lag time, factory default is normal. Let's just leave it that way because that's the best setting for that. HDMI, this is where you can actually control your output of your resolution on the output. In this situation, I can do 1080 if I want to, but in this situation, the projector that actually they're using over here can output 720, and it actually maxes out at 720. So I keep it at 720. Okay, video out. This is kind of important. It's grayed out obviously because I don't have a setting that's not utilized. Make me utilize it. NTSC is our broadcast. It's our United States broadcast standard. You have 2 choices: NTSC and PAL. So let's say I'm in Italy and I want to show Uncle Tony some pictures on his TV set. The European format is PAL, P-A-L format. This will give me the ability to play my image back on his TV set. So, okay, info settings. This is very important. If I go to the right, and go to my playback settings. Playback settings is that little blue arrow. So when I play back, this lets me customize what to be shown when I play back the image. So if you just want to see image only, I would just check that, uncheck everybody else. If I want to do an overall, if I want to do a histogram, if I want to do highlights and shadows, or if I want to do lightbox, I can check those features that want to appear as I scroll through that info button in playback mode. This is just basically customizing what you want to see when you press that info button in playback mode. Live view information. Okay, as I'm pressing the info button through live view, this is where I can utilize and show these features. Display grid. This will give you your grids for visual aid. A lot of people like using grids for your horizon. A lot of people like using the second grid down, which is basically like a tic-tac-toe feature. That's for rule of thirds. So if somebody has a problem trying to compose an image utilizing the rule of thirds law, again, these are all visual aids, okay, that'll project on the viewfinder or in the screen an actual grid for visual aid. Picture mode settings, again, when you're in picture mode settings, this gives you the ability to leave some out if you don't want to, if you don't use them. Okay, I enhance, vivid, muted, portrait monotone. If I don't plan on using any of these features, I can check them off. So this way, when I scroll through, I don't have to sit there and scroll through all of them at that one time. These are your histogram settings. Again, this is how you adjust your histograms. I'm not a histogram person, so I'm just going to simply not go over this at this point. Mode guide. Again, this is how you turn your mode guides on and off. Live view boost. If you're a manual shooter, you'll notice that on some of the cameras, on the M1s, that the factory default, if I don't have that bright shutter aperture combination, you'll notice that the screen gets very dark and it's almost impossible to compose. This is where you would turn your live view boost on. Okay, live view boost on will give you a normally exposed image, and then you have to adjudge by using that little grid that's on the bottom right hand side what your proper exposure is. Okay, I'm just not going to go into that in depth. I'm not going to go into this in depth at all because just leave them at your factory default settings. I'm not going to get into that in depth either. Peaking settings, this is where, when I'm doing focus peaking, and this is where I can actually change my colors. I did mention that on the EM5 Mark II and on the EM1, once you've upgraded to 4.0 firmware, you're going to be able to actually control your peaking colors. And at this point, I can actually change it from white, I can change it to black, I can change it to red or yellow, all depending on on your shooting situation. If I'm shooting in a situation where it's very bright and there's no contrast, I definitely don't want to use white because it's going to be almost impossible to see that haze as I'm going back and forth to see where my focus points are. So this is where you can choose a contrast, either white or black, or red or yellow, depending on your situation. You can control the intensity of it, and you can adjust the brightness as well. Okay. Backlit LCD, let's leave that alone. Sleep. Right now the camera's set for default as off. The camera's default is 1 minute. What does that mean? What does that do? If the camera's left unattended, if I don't touch any buttons or any controls on the camera itself, okay, the camera will go into a sleep mode. To get the camera out of sleep mode, all I basically have to do is touch any dial. That will basically wake the camera up after that, okay? So off or on. Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. Yeah, sleep, okay. Auto power off, which is the second, which is actually the mode just below sleep. Auto power off, default on the camera set for 4 hours. That means if you leave the camera totally unattended for 4 hours, it'll physically shut down. So the only way to activate the camera would be to shut the dial off and to turn the power back on again. It's just basically as a power saving feature or function in the camera itself. This is the beep mode. This is your autofocus confirmation. Factory default setting is on. It makes that beep noise when you're focusing. Some people like to shut it off. I particularly like to shut it off. I don't like the idea of people knowing when I'm taking pictures, especially with silent shutter. Just leave that on auto. That's auto detect, so it means when you plug your USB cable into your computer, your USB auto connect to your computer itself. Multifunction settings. Again, this gives me, when I choose that multifunction mode, this gives me the advantage to turn specific stuff on or turn specific stuff off when I'm in that multifunction mode. Multifunction settings is a setting that you assign to your function buttons. Okay, just want to make sure you understand that. Menu recall in your EM1 Mark II. This was first introduced when this camera came out. It simply says that when I'm in my menu and I leave it at one position, if I get out of my menu and go back to menu, it's going to recall back to that same position where I left off. So you can turn that feature off if you want to, or on. Okay, EV. We're up to your E section, which is exposure. The camera default is 1/3 step exposure values. Leave it that way. That will give you your best results between aperture settings or shutter speed settings. It's giving you it's giving you 1/3 step exposure values. Noise reduction, that's set to automatic. Leave that on automatic because basically it will only be utilized when it's actually needed. Noise reduction is used when you're doing long time exposures. So let's say if I'm doing a 1-minute exposure, after that 1-minute exposure is done, my noise reduction kicks in. It will take an extra minute to actually, what it does is puts a black mask over the image itself to eliminate any noise, any actually fixed pattern noise. So leave that on auto because you'll get great results anytime you're doing exposures longer than 30 seconds. Noise filter, leave it on standard. Right now I have the camera set for ISO auto. I'm not going to get into this because the super control panel has that. Okay, let's leave ISO steps at 130V. Let's leave these as they are. Metering, yeah, I'll go over with this in here in this mode, but you can also do this within the super control panel. Simply because it's just very easy to access in super control panel. So you don't have to scroll through all this stuff. But let me just show you the features that you can do with this at this point. The camera defaults to ESP, which is electroselective pattern. It's an Olympus exclusive. Basically, it meters pretty much, I would say, a good 85 to 90% of the area itself. It averages for you and gives you the best results. In some situations, you may not want to use that. If you're a Nikon user, Nikon basically based since the beginning of metering, based it on center weight. So if you want a center weight, which basically meters it's just a good portion of the center of the viewfinder, this is where you would actually utilize that metering mode. If I want to do spot, this is where I would access the spot. Spot meters, it only meters just in a very small position of that screen. AEL metering, we'll just leave that alone. Bulb timer, time timer, 8 minutes is set for max, just leave that alone. Leave this setting alone. Live bulb, that gives me the option to turn live bulb on or live bulb off. And it also gives you a display count itself. I should really get into this just a little bit. In live bulb, the beauty about mirrorless cameras is that if I'm in a live bulb situation, it gives me a time exposure where it leaves the shutter open. The beauty about it is you can see the image progressively exposing on the screen at the back, and it takes all the guesswork out. This is something that you cannot do in a mirrored camera. Mirrored camera, you have to take your exposure first, look at your final results and say, man, I could have kept it on another 30 seconds. It means you'd have to take the picture again. What's beautiful about this camera is that you can see the image progressively exposing on the screen and shut it off anytime you want to. So this is where I would set my, my display counts. Live time, if I'm in live time, this basically shows me how much time the screen refreshes. At this point, it's set for 5 seconds. So the screen refreshes for every 5 seconds, or half a second, I should say. Again, in live composite, let me just tell you a little bit of difference between live composite and live time and live bulb. Live time and live bulb will just keep on progressively exposing until you shut it off. What's nice about live composite, it's the best of both worlds. It actually is a two-step process. First step is it looks for light that's existing. So if let me give you a scenario. You're in the Jersey side, you photograph the New York skyline lit up at night. You press that camera, shut a button down once. Okay, it looks for existing light. That would be all the buildings that are lit, that are always lit. It will save that and it'll hold it. It's going to prompt you to take another exposure. You take that second exposure, it holds that first exposure, and it looks for new light that actually enters the screen, light that's actually moving. So let's say there's a tugboat going across or a helicopter going across. Okay, you're going to catch the new light that's entering the screen while not overexposing the existing light that you took in the first exposure. So it composites both of those images together. It is a great mode. I suggest that you try it. It is a lot of fun and a lot of creativity that you can do with live bulb and live time. Okay, let's get back because we are half an hour and we're doing pretty good. Doing pretty good here. So again, composite settings, this is where I would just adjust my exposure time per image. So this, or basically your refresh rate. Okay, sync, this is where I can choose my high-speed sync. This camera, I can, at full duration flash, I can go as high, as 1/250th of a second. Oops. Sorry about that. It's a 1/250th of a second. I can adjust that if I wanted to. I can go lower if I want to, or I can go higher. Does everybody know the ratio when it comes to when you're shooting flash photography? What does flash, or what the effect does shutter speed have in flash or aperture? Okay, shutter speed has the effect of ambient light, the light that's around the subject itself. So if I want to lighten up the subject, lighten up the ambient light, I'd go for a slower shutter speed. If I wanted to darken the ambient light around the subject, I'd move the shutter speed up higher. Again, with the Olympus cameras in the FPTTL mode, I have the ability to actually going all the way up to 1/8,000th of a second, which is the max. This was an Olympus invention back in the 70s, which a lot of people use. But keep in mind, as you go higher on the shutter speed scale, your guide number of your flash goes progressively down as well. So when you're not at 8,000th of a second, you're not going to get full output of your flash itself, but you're going to get some good enough for film actually. So this is where I adjust my high limit. So if I'm shooting outdoors, in bright sunlight, I want it as high as I possibly go. So it's defaulted at 2/50th of a second. This is my slow limit. This is as low as my shutter speed's going to go if I'm indoors or in low light. 160 is a good general rule of thumb. If you're in a situation where your subject's not moving, your subject is static, and you want to bring up more ambient light in the image, oops, I'm sorry, I did that by mistake. You have the ability to lower it down. So as I lower this down, okay, I'm given the ability to catch more ambient light with this. Okay, so again, this is where you would do it. The camera's default is 60. It's a good rule of thumb to start out with, but again, you have the ability to customize that as well. Okay, G, I'm going to give you another Brian Rycyk tip over here. This is where you would set your resolutions, all your resolutions or your JPEG resolutions. The camera hides large superfine. Large superfine is lossless compression. It's 1 to 2.3 compression. It's probably one of the least compressed JPEG files in the industry. This is where I can access that and hold it within the camera itself. So what I usually do is in section number 1, I bring up my compression to superfine. I leave this on fine. Again, this is just my own liking. Again, you might think totally different. And I leave this section medium, basically medium normal. And I actually downsize it to a small basic, which is like a 640 by 480. If I'm in a situation where I'm just taking pictures just to put on the web and do not plan on printing it at all, I go to small basic because it gives me the advantage of putting a lot of files on the camera. And also when you're transferring files, you're not transferring huge files, you're transferring very small files. So when I access Small Basic, it's basically just for, again, internet viewing, nothing, for Facebook or whatever, where I don't need to actually blow up. If I do shoot in this mode and decide to blow up a large image, well, that's when you're in trouble, because it's basically, it's very highly compressed and it's taking a lot of information out. Okay, but this is basically what I set it as. It gives me a good range, gives me my best JPEG resolution, gives me a good fine JPEG resolution, gives me something in the middle, and gives me a very basic, very, very small image file. Pixel count, we're going to leave alone. Shading compensation, this if you're in an area where there is bright and dark, shading compensation will give you just a little bit more detail in the shady area. It gives you a little bit more natural looking image, the way the eye would see it. White balance, obviously my white balance is set to auto. I'm going to leave this alone. Keep warm color. Camera default is on. It's going to shoot an image that's going to be a little bit on the warm side. I particularly don't like it. I have it off. Again, that's my preference. Your preference might be completely different, all depending on your shooting, your type of shooting. I take a picture with it on, take a picture with it off, see which one you like, and then turn it on or off to your preference. Okay, so it just naturally keeps all auto white balance features just a little bit warmer or just off completely itself. Flash push white balance, we're just going to leave that auto, just leave that auto. Color space. The camera defaults to sRGB, which is your standard RGB. You can go to Adobe RGB. They leave it on sRGB as a default simply because I would say 99 and 91 hundredths of your monitors that are sold today are all sRGB. Adobe RGB opens up a broader color space, a broader color palette. So if you're in a specific situation, well, let me give you an example. I had to do a brochure for a fabric company that had like 20 or 30 different swatches. And the actual brochure was actually printed on a Heidelberg press where your colors are dead on. So I said, you know what, let me go to Adobe RGB. Let me do a manual white balance. Let me photograph those swatches so they could be printed. This is a way that I can guarantee the color is going to be dead on. And for this reason, yes, the reason why I did it was because a client is going to pick this brochure, and he's going to order through a few 100,000 yards of this fabric, based on the brochure. So again, if you need color you need a broader color palette. Let me explain it one more time, a different way. Let's say if you're going to a Staples store and you're picking up a box of 44 Crayola crayons, or a box of 144 Crayola crayons. So that's the difference. sRGB is the box of 44, Adobe RGB is that box of 144. Gives you a broader color palette. Again, most of the time in your shooting scenarios, you're going to be shooting sRGB, and that's it. Okay, we're going to jump to the next one. Someone mentioned to me about this before, about quick erase. This is where you shut that feature off. A quick erase is if I'm reviewing my image and I hit that garbage can, off default right now gives me that extra step. It says, are you sure you want a quick erase? So it's a yes or a no setting. To skip that setting, you put that on. If you press that trash can while you're reviewing that image, okay, it's going to trash the image right away. It's not going to give you that extra step. Are you sure? Yes or no. So this is the area where your quick erase feature you can turn on or off. If you're not used to doing it, I would suggest leaving it off. I leave it on, only because it just saves me so much more time. It's just one less button push that I have to do. This is where you would set your RAW plus JPEG to erase, or your RAW to just erase, or your JPEG just erase. This is if you're in RAW plus JPEG mode only. File name reset, leave it alone. That's the factory default setting. This is, I'm not going to get into this in detail, but I'm just going to show you what it does. This gives me the advantage to add a prefix in the beginning. Why would I use this? Let's say if I had 4 people on a shoot and they're all using the same camera, I can set one letter that would be for this certain person, another letter for this person, another person. I can designate a prefix or a letter in front for each shooter. This way I'll know who actually screwed up in case they did. Are you going to use this? Probably not. So we're going to stay out of this. But I figured I had to say that. Priority set, if you set it to yes, again, in certain features, it eliminates that yes and no, and gets you right there. DPI settings, let's leave it at 350 DPI, that's fine. If you want to copyright, this is where you would copyright your image. Okay, movie modes, again, when you're in movie mode, it gives you the option to shoot program, aperture priority, shutter priority, or manual. That's in movie mode. This next section gives you the ability to record sound or not. So if you want sound recorded, turn it on. Obviously the camera's default is on. This is where you adjust your recording volume. Volume limiter, it just limits the volume to a certain level so you don't overpeak. Wind noise reduction, if you're shooting video and it's very windy outside, turn the noise reduction on. It will eliminate that blowing noise that you hear. Plug-in power, this is for phantom power and microphones. This is where you would link your PCM linear recorder to your camera. Again, this is a whole new class in itself. You know, if you're shooting video and you have a linear PCM recorder that you need to use, besides the camera itself, you would utilize that itself, PCM. Okay, headphone volume, this is where I adjust my headphone volume. This is where I adjust my time code settings. This is where I adjust my info settings. This is all on movie alone. Again, this is just a whole new class in itself. I would just basically going over shutter functions. You can change your shutter functions as well. Noise filters, just leave it on standard. Picture mode, leave it off. Built-in EVF. The top one's grayed out, but you can change the style of your EVF. You know, if you want information up top and bottom, you want information on the side. If you want to change your colors, it's just basically changing your internal viewfinder to different types of scenarios. Okay, display grids. Again, this you can control what information settings that you want. You can turn your display grids on and off as well. This is where your auto switches. You know, when the camera automatically switches when you put your eye up to it. Some people kind of find it annoying. This is where you can actually shut the auto switch feature off on your EVF, on your electronic viewfinder.
So what do you do?
Excuse me?
What are you doing?
Yeah, it's what I'm doing right now. Every time I put my hand on it, it switches over. Whoops.
It's very annoying.
If you find that annoying, just go right in there and just turn it off. Okay, if you look at the external button on your camera, you're going to look for an external button that looks like a square in brackets. That's how you would toggle back and forth from LCD to viewfinder. Okay. Pixel mapping. This is kind of important to mention. If you do find a scenario where you look at your image and you see a white, a red, or green, or a blue dot that's always in that same spot every time you take a picture, it means that you have a stuck pixel or a pixel that's not working correctly. Beauty about Olympus, I'm not sure about other manufacturers, but I'm pretty sure this is Olympus exclusive. It has a pixel mapping feature. I just go over here and simply press start. What that does, that finds any pixels that are not working, any stuck pixels, and actually the pixel that's joining that, it'll basically interpolate that working pixel. So you don't have to deal with that bright dot that's always there on your print or in your viewfinder. When I'm doing a job, let's say if I'm doing a wedding or I'm doing a job that requires a lot of pictures, I definitely pixel map before I actually take the image, because if I had somebody sitting there taking a dot out of every single picture, Yeah, that's very time consuming. So this is just one way of eliminating a potential problem. Okay, this could happen, this could not happen, but does it happen? I'll say yes, but does it happen all the time? Probably not. Okay, I'm not going to go into shift. Warning level. Warning level, basically, you can actually tell the camera to prematurely let you know that the battery's dying or extend it. It's not going to extend the life of the battery itself. It's just going to give you a warning prematurely or later. Your lithium batteries, if you have a fully charged battery, it stays fully charged, and then when it goes, it just drops like that. So it gives you the ability to warn you before it really is ready to go.
So what do you recommend?
I always use the default. The default is fine. The default gives you plenty of warning because you're going to get that on the upper left-hand side. You're going to get that little flashing red. That's going to give you enough time to switch batteries. Level adjust, this is where you would adjust your level. Just leave that alone, it's fine. iFi, if you look on the bottom, that's if you're using an iFi type of card. Electronic zoom speed, if you have a 14 to 42 EZ lens or a 12 to 50 EZ lens, you can actually control the speed of its zoom. You can actually control fast or slow. Selfie assist, this is new to me. Quick sleep mode, if you have an EM5 Mark II, I would suggest that you shut it off the way you see it over there. Quick sleep mode can confuse you between regular sleep mode. So just for my best advice to you is just keep it off. Keep it off, you'll be fine. For your wrench menu, top feature is I find extremely important. A lot of people don't do it. Set your date, set your time. It's very important because a lot of software categorizes your images via a catalog and time. It makes it so much easier for you to utilize or bring back an image just by date. So it just categorizes it so much better in chronological order. So it's important to set your time and date. If somebody does something like this to you, you go into the wrench menu, go where that little face is, okay, and then just go to English, and then you're back to normal again. But I believe there's over 40 programmed in the camera. You can program more online when you have the camera tethered to a USB cable. So again, the camera has tons of different languages. Yeah, you can learn a language. The one underneath it is my LCD. Okay, I can adjust temperature and also I can adjust the brightness. That's where I would adjust it with this. Okay, another Brian tip. Record view. Camera defaults is 1/2 second. Color temperature. You're making it warmer or cooler. Yep. The camera defaults is 1/2 second. That means when I take the image itself, it's going to hold that picture for 1/2 second for you to review, and then it goes back to a live screen. I can't stand that. I shut it off. So, because it just gives me a live image all the time. If I want to review the image, I just press that playback button, and I'm there. So, I prefer it off. You can have it hold. You can have it hold for up till I believe 30 seconds or 20 seconds. I think it slows things up. Mentally, it slows things up. So I just like that off. Wi-Fi settings, this is if you want to set your a password. This is where if you want to do a private, send the signal out to a private, just to yourself, or if you want to share. This is where you would actually change those settings. Super control panel. Let's do this. With the EM5 Mark II, the default is if you press the OK button, it pulls this thing up called Super Control Panel. But once you have this set up to go, you activate it by simply pressing the OK button, and it gives me all these features over here. Here's all my white balance settings. My ISO settings. Here's all my white balance settings. This is if I want to adjust just reds or greens. Someone mentioned to me that they shoot in portrait mode all the time. Basically, if you were to pull up your super control panel, if you look at portrait, it'd be a little adjustment of this number. As I bring this number up, it actually warms the image up. It introduces warmer tones to it. If I wanted to go down and customize it, where I want to add some more greens to it, this is where I would go to make the adjustment. The camera default is 0. Again, it's something that you can play around with and adjust it to your liking. Picture mode settings. Picture mode settings are right up over here. Okay, there's where I can access all my natural, muted, portraits, monotones, customs. I can do my portraits, underwater color creator. That's where I access my color. This is where I can access all my art filters without even turning the mode dial. Okay, so the camera is set for natural. In JPEG mode, I can customize my sharpness, or I can customize my contrast. This is where you would make that adjustment right over here. Again, so I can add or desaturate, or I can add or take away contrast by going to this setting. Let's go down over here to the right. This is where all my flash mode settings are. Okay, as you see, it's so easy to do. You don't have to sit there and scroll through a arduous menu. This is where pretty much all your features are going to be utilized or changed at this point. So again, the cameras usually defaults to auto. Again, you got red eye reduction. This is where I'd use flash fill. This is where if I don't want the flash to fire at all. This is slow sync. This gives me a slow sync with red eye reduction. This is slow sync, first curtain sync, the second curtain sync. If I want to shoot manual and choose my outputs, manually choose my outputs, this is where I do that setting right over there. Focus points. Okay, if I turn my rear dial, actually this will also give me the ability to scroll. If I turn my front dial, this gives me the ability to actually change my focus point selection. As you can see, as I'm turning it one way, it goes one way, turn it the other way, it goes the other way. Here are all your focus modes right here. Single autofocus, continuous autofocus, manual focus, single autofocus plus manual focus, continuous autofocus plus tracking. Okay, that's how I get to all my focus modes.
Where do you keep it?
I prefer single autofocus plus manual focus. Like I mentioned before, I like the ability of the camera to focus first. It focuses fast, and this gives me the ability to tweak a little bit if need be. So it gives me some control. Again, RGB color space. I'm not going to get into gradation. This is where I adjust my Adobe or RGB color space. This is where I adjust my facial recognition. Okay, to be honest with you, I prefer off, but some people like doing facial recognition. There's where you actually get into that. Okay, if I'm in manual mode, this is exposure compensation for flash exposure comp. This is very important to use. I'll give you a typical scenario. I was doing an Orthodox engagement party in the 5 towns, and the women were dancing outside in the backyard in a circle, and it was dark outside. The women were in black dresses from ankles to neck. And I'm sitting there in the middle having a great time getting these awesome pictures, capturing this action while shooting flash. And I figured, let me just take a look at one of the images. I took one of the images, brought up the face, and the face was as white as a sheet of paper. There was no detail because the flash was seeing predominantly black, and it's trying to expose for 18% gray. So this is where I made the adjustment. I said, okay, well, got it. I got to tone down the flash. I had to tone down the flash 2 stops to get detail back in the face again. So this is where I make that adjustment. Very easy. These are all my drive modes over here. Okay, single means take the picture once, only takes it once. This is my anti-shock modes. This is my silent shutter mode in single. This is my high-speed sequential. If I press that button down and hold it down, it's going to shoot 10 frames per second. This is silent. Okay, this will give me the ability to shoot almost, actually 11 frames per second. Low, high. Self-timer modes right here, 12-second delay. 12-second delay with anti-shock. This is also where, you set on your EM5 Mark II, this is where you also, where did I show it? Where you shoot that high resolution mode. This will shoot that at the 40 megapixel mode, high resolution mode. Okay, this is on EM5 Mark II owners. Okay, if you go over to the right, remember I mentioned metering modes? There's your metering modes, okay? Metering modes?
Metering.
Metering. I'm sorry, here's your metering modes. This is, again, this is where I told you about ESP. I showed you this in the menu. This is where you can get to it instantaneously. So again, this is ESP again, metering. We have center weighted, we have spot, and your highlight and shadow spot modes. Image stabilizer, there's all your image stabilizer modes. Okay. I'd say for the most part, SIS Auto is probably the image stabilizer mode that you could probably use 99% of the time. So just leave it at that. Remember all your JPEG settings? Okay, this is JPEG plus RAW. If you're a RAW shooter, this is where you would set up to your RAW mode. This is, you notice now that's now displaying large superfine. Remember I did it in the menu system where I brought up that large superfine. That's how I access it now once it's set. Aspect ratios. Okay, 16:9. If I'm taking pictures with the intent of just showing it on a 16:9 screen, which these are 16:9 configurations. Okay, this will give me let me utilize that whole screen without any cropping itself. Okay, I can change it to 3:2 setting. I can change it to 1:1, which is basically square. Here's another way. Here's another way to see them all spelled out. If you want to see this all spelled out, let's say I want to see all the features that I have in that mode. If I press the OK button twice, second time, it's going to show all my options, so I can utilize the arrow pad to go back and forth on this. Okay. That's just another way of viewing it other than the super control panel. Okay, I guess we're all done. I have to, unfortunately, I have to clear out of here at 3 o'clock. I have a plane to catch to Toronto, and I have a live composite class tonight to do. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.